Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today to learn more about Childcare Stabilization 2.0 for workforce supports. Before we get started, just a few pieces of housekeeping to go over with all of you. First, you probably figured this out, but all lines are muted. This does allow for greater quiet during our presentation today. However, we do encourage you to ask questions. If you have a question, put that into the Q&A box for us, and we will have ample time at the end to go over all questions. Third and final piece of housekeeping is that this webinar is being recorded and the slide deck and recording will be made available shortly after the session. Before I pass it over to Chastity from OCFS, I did want to go over our agenda for today. Chastity is going to give us an overview of the Stabilization 2.0 grant. I'm then going to go over grant portal instructions, so how you log in and what you can expect. I'll also show you some really fabulous website and training resources, and then we'll answer all of the questions that you have for us. So now I'm going to pass it over to Chastity for the next few slides.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chastity Ponce. I'm the Assistant Bureau Director here, and I will be reviewing Stabilization 2.0. And as I'm sure most of you have heard, Governor had announced the applications are open for Stabilization 2.0. We're excited to talk to you all today about this. So we can go to the next slide, please. First, we're going to provide an overview of the Stabilization 2.0, and then you'll be shown the portal demonstration, as Piper had said. So for the overview, if you don't know what Child Care Stabilization Grant is, OCFS released the first stabilization back in August of 2021, and $1.074 billion was made available to eligible child care providers to help stabilize the child care industry and allow for more parents to return to work full-time. And obviously, based on the success of Stabilization 1.0, we, through the American Rescue Plan Act and the Coronavirus Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, right, we are able to make available another $343 million, specifically targeting the workforce supports through Stabilization 2.0. We're going to go through the requirements for the grant. So what you need to know is that obviously OCFS is prioritizing the workforce support for the child care staff. So 75% of Stabilization 2.0 grant money should be used for workforce supports, and the remaining 25% can be spent or used on other eligible expenses. Programs that are determined eligible for Stabilization 2.0 will receive up to 2 payments, approximately 60 days apart. Next slide, please. So for eligible programs, the types include OCFS licensed or registered programs, enrolled legally exempt group child care programs, New York City permitted group child care programs, and all of them had to be licensed, registered, permitted, or enrolled on or before January 1st, 2022. Next slide, please. So when it comes to using your Stabilization 2.0 funds, as I had stated previously, 75%, at least 75%, should be spent on workforce initiatives. And this includes bonuses, right, wage increases. We could do contributions towards health insurance and costs that reduce such costs for staff. Contributions to staff retirement plans, supplemental education advancement or tuition reimbursement, mental health supports and services for staff. And just know, if maybe not every program will have some of these items. So if there are no existing, let's say, staff retirement plans or educational advancement tuition reimbursement programs, the Child Care Stabilization 2.0 the support funds can be used to fund these initiatives. So just keep that in mind. The other 25% can be used on eligible expenses such as personnel costs, which would include like payroll and salaries, employee benefits, retirement costs, educational costs, rent, which include under a lease agreement or payment of any mortgage obligations, utilities, insurance, facility maintenance or improvements, which could be defined as minor renovations, including outdoor learning spaces, playgrounds, personal protective equipment, so that would be your cleaning and sanitation supplies, services, or any type of training related to health and safety practices. You can purchase updated equipment and supplies, goods and services necessary to maintain or resume child care services, mental health supports for children and employees, and health and safety trainings for staff, which could include CPR, first aid, and any trainings, of course, related to COVID. So, next slide, please. When can providers apply? For this, Stabilization 2.0 was rolled out in 2 phases. So the portal was opened on July 5th, 2022 for recipients of Stabilization 1.0, except for those that are school-age child care programs, right? So, and then under phase 2, the grant application opened on August 30th, yesterday, right, to those eligible providers who didn't receive Stabilization 1.0 and the SAC programs who received Stabilization 1.0 and any new providers licensed on or before January 1st, 2022. The portal closes on November 30th, 2022. And just so you know, payments will automatically be made via the account on file. So we just want to make sure your information is updated as well. Next slide, please. So an extra note for everybody to be mindful of, providers who previously received Stabilization 1.0 will need to complete an expense report before their first payment for Stabilization 2.0 is released, okay? And then under Stabilization 2.0, 30 days after you receive the funds, the providers need to complete an expense report for your workforce support first payment in order to process your second payment. And we will be sending reminder emails as well, just to make sure that you stay on track with submitting the required expense reports to maintain your grant payment. Okay, and I think now Piper is going to take you through some portal instructions.
I sure am, Chastity. Before we move on, though, since John is with us, John, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, thank you, Pepper. But I think Chastity covered everything.
Fantastic, great. And just a reminder to everyone, I know some of you, a bunch of you actually just joined us in the last couple of minutes. Welcome, fabulous to have you here. If you missed the beginning of this, not to worry, we are recording and we'll post this to the website, which I'll show you a little bit later. And secondly, if you have any questions, put those into the Q&A box and there will definitely be ample time at the end of our presentation to answer your questions. So now that we have an overview of the grant, how you can spend funds, let's take a look at the grant application itself. 2 ways you can apply for this grant. You can go right to the website listed here at the top, childcare.grants.ocfs.ny.gov, Or you can click the Apply Now button on the OCFS Stabilization website. And after I do this walkthrough, I am going to go to the website. I'll show you exactly where that Apply Now button is and also show you some really fantastic resources should you need a little assistance filling out the application. After you click the Apply Now button, you'll go to the Grant Opportunities homepage, which is located on the Child Care. You'll go to the Grant Opportunities homepage. You'll look for the Child Care Stabilization Grant under Grant Opportunities, and on the right-hand side, you'll see an Apply/Review button. Clicking this button will bring you to our first step. So before you access the application, we need you to complete this provider verification step. We need to verify that you and your facility are eligible to access your system. Couple things to keep in mind here. One is you can only complete one application at a time. So if you do have multiple facilities or multiple programs you'd like to do this for, you'll need to complete an application for each of them per facility ID. And what you'll do is if you're brand new, so if you did not apply for Stabilization 1, you're going to look on the left side of this provider verification page. You're going to select New York State or New York City provider. You'll then enter your license or registration number into the box and click search. Now, if you're unsure where to find that, you'll look for this question mark right here, and this will show you what this does is you'll click this, it'll bring up a nice image, and it'll show you exactly where to find that license or registration information. Now, if you did apply for Stabilization 1 and you submitted an application, that submitted application is going to appear in this drop-down menu here on the right. So you'll simply click the arrow here, you'll choose the appropriate application from the drop-down menu, and then you'll click the Next button. When you get to the submitted applications page here, or if you're a new facility, or if you're submitting an application for the first time, first you'll make sure all this information looks good. If for whatever reason you do need to change your facility, there is the Change Facility button right here. You'll click this and this will allow you to change to a different facility. Once you're ready to proceed, you're going to look in the Actions column on the right, and you're going to look for Workforce Support Application. You'll select this, and this will bring you to the official application itself. There are 7 steps here. We say 7 steps, but the first one isn't really a step, it's just instructions. So there's really only 6 steps. The instructions is your first stop on submitting your application. This goes over some basics of filling out the application, talks about the deadline, which is Wednesday, November 30th, 2022 at 11:59 p.m. Note that any applications received after this deadline will not be reviewed, so be sure to get in your application before that date and time. Uh, it will also talk about who is eligible down here. So if you see something that has this little arrow or caret, click that and that'll provide you more information. After you've read the instructions, you'll click the Next button. It's really important for everyone to be aware, though, that this application does not save. So it doesn't take a ton of time to complete. You'll see as we go through these steps, you'll be able to move through them pretty quickly, but do be sure that you have the appropriate amount of time to complete this because you will not be able to save it. You'll have to do it all in one sitting. After clicking the Next button, you'll be brought to the first official step of this application, which is your operational status. There are 3 questions here. As you move through the application, you'll see questions that have a red star or asterisk next to them. Anything with a star or asterisk is required, and you must complete that information before proceeding to the next step. So for instance, if I just answered the first 2 questions here and clicked next, the system would not let me go forward until I had completed all of these questions. 3 questions for operational status are, do you have any Head Start, early Head Start, or publicly funded pre-K funding supporting your program? Next one is, what is the status of your program? Are you open and providing in-person care for at least one child? Or are you temporarily closed or not providing in-person care? And the last question is, do you currently have any children in care who are receiving childcare subsidy through the local social service districts as of the date of this application? Once these are answered, you'll click the next button. Step 3 is child count information. We did this in a demo environment, so our testing environment, so it's not pre-populated, but in your application, it will be pre-populated and it cannot be modified. Note that all programs must be in good standing, open, and caring for at least one child at the time of application, except if they're closed due to a short-term reason with a duration of 1 month or less. Now, if you've gotten to this step and you have questions, you can, or you need any assistance, you can always reach out to your local CCR&R, and we have conveniently populated their information for you right here. You'll have the name of your CCR&R as well as an email address and a phone number. When you're ready to move on, select the next button. Fourth step here is estimated grant award amount. This is an estimated amount, and as Chastity mentioned, total award amounts will be split into 2 grant payments and will be made to providers who are open, providing in-person care, and are in good standing at the time each payment is made. When you're ready to move on, once again, you'll click the next button. Options for use of funds. So this is a really important step. This is where planned expenses must be entered. So this is, how do you intend to use your grant money? Grant funds must be used for one or more of the purposes listed on this page, and to support the child care workforce and to assist with recruitment and retention efforts. As mentioned earlier, at least 75% of the funding must be used towards the expenses in each of these categories below. So how do you fill out your expenses? First, what you'll do is you'll choose the expense that you'd like to populate, and you'll click this little arrow to the right. And this will bring you to a box that looks like this. And you'll do this for each of the different categories. You'll enter how much you plan to spend in this category. You'll then enter a description. So this one says bonuses or increases in wages. Maybe you're giving bonuses to your staff, so you could enter that in the description. And then on the right here is your records description. How do you plan to record this? Will it be through payroll? Are you giving them checks? Will it be in your bank account or checkbook or something like that? So you'll record the how you're going to spend the money and then how you're going to record how you've done that. And another way to put that would be how that expense will be tracked. All right, then you'll click save. And again, you'll do this for each of the categories that you plan to spend your expenses for. Step 6, almost done here, is review application. So this is another step where you'll want to pay careful attention to each of these categories. Once your application is submitted, you won't be able to change that information. So it's going to list out each of those different areas of this application. And if anything is incorrect, so maybe you do have some Head Start or public funding or something like that. If an answer to one of these questions is incorrect, you'll simply click the edit button. This will bring you right back to that section and you'll be able to edit it. When you're ready to proceed, this page as well, as I'm sure you've already guessed, has a next button. And that'll bring you to the last step of the application, which are your provider attestation and terms and conditions. So by agreeing to these terms and conditions and applying for the Child Care Stabilization Grant for workforce supports, you certify that all information provided as a part of this application is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge, and that you agree to each of the following statements. Read through each of these very carefully. Check the boxes. At the bottom, you'll have an opportunity to sign this. And then your final step is you'll click the submit button to submit your application. After submitting your application, two things will happen. One, you'll be brought to this nice thank you page, which has your application number, also gives you an opportunity to download a copy of your application. Secondly, you're going to receive an email to the email address on file with the New York City or New York State database for that facility that has your application, that says that your application was submitted and includes some additional important information. So that is the application. Not too much to fill out for this particular application. Key things to keep in mind are that it does not save, and that you might want to think about how you're going to spend your money so that when you get to that planned expenses page, you have an idea of what to fill in there. And now I'm going to move on to some resources for all of you that you may find really helpful. Available resources. So if you have been to the Stabilization One website a while ago, we have updated the website to reflect both stabilization grants. And I'm going to pause my screen real quick and I'm going to bring up this actual website so I can show you some interesting things on here. All right, have the website up. I'm thinking you can all see my screen, but if you can't, let me know. So this is the Child Care Stabilization website. At the top here, we do have an important scam alert. Do pay attention to this. Always remember that OCFS will never contact you to ask for a verification code. If something seems off to you, do call the stabilization helpline. You can also report fraud directly to this number right here. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I did want to show you that apply button. So to apply for this grant, you'll click the apply now button here. Before you do that, though, if you have any questions, we have a fantastic stabilization helpline here to assist you. They're available Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. If you have any questions, you can give them a call. You could also reach out, as I mentioned, to your local CCR&R. Now, what about those resources I was telling you about? You'll come to contents here. Overview will give you an overview of the grant. And then if you click on this third option, Statement of Grant Opportunities, this gives you several several supports for this particular grant. If you're interested in reading the full Statement of Grant Opportunity, you can do so. We also have listed out all of those provider attestations if you want to review them. We have application instructions, an application guide, options for use of funds, and troubleshooting my.ny.gov issues. So if you go to log in with your personal my.ny.gov account and you have some issues, this is a nice document that will outline some basic troubleshooting for you. All of these are available in English and Spanish. And to open any of them, you simply click the word PDF next to English or Spanish, and this will open that document for you. So this is the options for use of funds guide that goes over how to input, how you plan to use your funds. And then the other one I wanted to show you was the application instructions right here. So you'll click this PDF. And this will walk you through what I showed you a little bit earlier, but it's all in one page. You can download these, you can print these if you'd like to save them to your computer. And now I'm going to minimize this. And as I promised, we do have ample time for questions. So I'm going to go through. Amanda, did you have, it looks like we have quite a few questions. And if you have questions, remember, pop those into the Q&A box for us.
Piper. Yeah, we do have a number of questions. I think some of them might have been addressed as we were going through the presentation. One of the first questions that came up is we have someone who's received an approval letter, but they did not receive any grants yet. They received the general email that their application's been approved and the payment's being processed, but hasn't seen any money come through yet.
I could take the answering that one. This is Jessica Nielsen. I also work in the supply and workforce unit for OCFS. So if you're not receiving your payment yet, the best thing that you can do in this situation is to reach out to your local CCR&R. They should be able to access your application, and if they aren't able to determine why the payment hasn't been received yet, they can reach out directly to OCFS and we can assist with that.
Okay, great. So this next question has to do with the use of funds and specifically in paying staff. So Lauren asks if the increase in wages can mean increasing your average hourly rate to attract staff. So if you're currently paying $15 an hour, but you increase to $17 per hour to attract new staff.
The answer to that one is yes. You can use those funds to increase your wages in order to either pay staff more and or hire additional staff.
So the next question has to do with how long folks have to use the funds. So the question is for stabilization one, don't we have until the end of the year to utilize the funds? Do we have to have all expenses reported before receiving 2.0 funds?
So for
I can take that
1.0,
one.
oh,
Oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead, John. Nope, you're good.
I was only going to say, so there is, again, like you just pointed out, there's plenty of time to be able to use the funds that you received. The exact date on them, I would refer you back to our website and also within the RFA itself, which has when you have to spend down by. The expense reports that are currently available do allow for you to enter that all zeros for the different values that no funds have been spent because, as you pointed out, you're not obligated to do so right now. The thing will be, though, is as we continue to move through the stabilization grant and beyond into the future, there will be future expense reports that you will eventually have to identify how the funds were spent, because we're also obligated to report to our federal oversight agencies that that the funds were used by that date. So you are right, like you can apply right now and have spent no funds. And in between the two payments, the expense report that will become available to release the second payment, you can also add that there was no funds spent yet. But just to be mindful that there is a date that those funds have to be utilized by.
Thank you, John. What should providers do who are going to apply that are licensed before January 1st, 2022, but the portal still says that they're not eligible? What should they do to follow up and try to fix that?
They can follow up with their local CCR&R office. They should be able to assist them with any troubleshooting that they're having with their application. I'm not sure when this person attempted to apply. We did have a small issue when the portal opened yesterday for any SAC programs that were eligible to apply. That issue has since been resolved. So if the person has not tried to apply again since yesterday morning, I would suggest trying to apply again. If you continue to get the message that you're not eligible, you can reach out to your local CCR&R office and they should be able to assist you with troubleshooting.
So we have another question about using the funds to pay for staff. And this is a little, if I'm reading it correctly, this question is actually asking if the funds can be used to pay for childcare for the staff at the center.
I would say that that's a more specific example. The ability for the programs to be able to pay for benefits of the staffing is allowed expense. It comes down to the documentation and how it's captured. Just to be mindful that you're also obligated to keep records of them moving forward and how the funds were spent. So if there was a perk or a bonus or funds that were made available as an addition to employment and the base salary amount, just to be monitoring what the dollar amount of that is and how it was spent and obligated and keeping records of it. I think it might be easier to look for more areas that are more straightforward, like the person that already called out the idea of giving their employees raises or posting new positions at a higher pay rate in order to attract more candidates, or perhaps bonuses, or using that money for salary by itself. That tends to be cleaner and it will be easier for bookkeeping. But if you choose to do it for bonuses or for perks, just attaching a dollar amount and then tracking how those dollars were spent.
Okay, so we have some questions about eligibility and the differences between Stabilization 2.0 that opened in July and the round that just opened yesterday. So if we could just clarify if you had to apply and receive stabilization funds for the second round, or if it's open for everyone. I know we already discussed that already, but I think it would be good just to touch on that one more time for everyone and maybe those who might have joined late.
I'm sorry, Amanda, I'm trying to, go ahead, Jess. I was trying to find the question actually, so if you have a better, go ahead.
I don't know if I have a full answer to that question, but I will say that initially when the Stabilization 2.0 workforce supports application opened, it was for providers that had already received Stabilization 1.0. Now the portal opening on 8/30 is for anyone who is a new provider who did not receive the Stabilization 1.0 funds, or any SAC programs that are now also eligible to apply for Stabilization 2.0 if they need the 2 additional payments, or if they've never applied for Stabilization 1.0, they can also apply.
Yeah, and I'll just take a step further and just to make clear, so, what the release that happened yesterday allows is for every program that has a license or registration prior to January 1st, 2022, on or before January 1st, 2022, is now eligible to apply for stabilization grants for workforce support expenses. These 2 payments. So some programs have already participated in stabilization with us previously, and this is a continuation of the grant money that they've already received. And now for the programs that hadn't had the opportunity, like maybe they were originally licensed in August of last year, that they would not have been eligible for stabilization 1.0, but they are now eligible for this workforce support expenses addition of 2 payments for the program. I hope that clarifies it. It's just to make sure that, this is a bigger net is all. Okay.
Yes, and I also just wanted to clarify one more time that we have some questions related to folks who've received their licenses after January 1st, 2022. So you would have needed to be licensed by or on January 1st, 2022. Okay, so we have a question that if you received the Stabilization 1 funding, but your modality has changed, can you apply for 2.0?
That is a good question. So in the solicitation of interest for Stabilization 2.0 funds was updated yesterday and it's available on our website. There is an expanded definition of eligibility that is spelled out there, and part of that is for what we're calling successor programs, which is what sounds like you're talking about. In these successor programs, an example of it might be that if it's a home-based provider that had to move locations, but never stopped services in between the two locations, they have the ability to go online, complete this form with necessary information for OCFS to determine whether or not they meet the eligibility that's laid out in that solicitation of interest. And then we will work to allow these successor programs to apply because they're connected to the original license that did meet the criteria. There's no guarantees of this, and there are dates to be mindful of as far as like how much time was there between the original program closing down and the successor program beginning operations. All of those details are available on the solicitation of interest, and if you are not sure if you are eligible, you can always complete that form and we will notify you.
Thank you, John. We have a question related to the expense report. So once a provider has received first payment for stabilization 2, what do they do to complete an expense report to ensure second payment?
The expense report will become available 30 days after you received your first payment. It'll be on the same area where you applied for the application originally. There'll be an icon that is created, and you'll be able to click on it and enter in the details of how the money was spent, if at all. Like we talked about earlier, you might not have spent it at all. And in that cases, you can report all $0 entries and then be able to move forward. You'll also get an automated notification sent to your email box that says that the expense report is currently available. You'll then be reminded 15 days later if the expense report has not been completed to do so. Otherwise, the next second payment could be delayed by not. And as a reminder, we cannot issue a second payment for this grant without having an expense report of how the first payment was used.
So we have a couple of questions on the application itself. I think might have come in when Piper was doing the demo. So the question is, why is the question there that's asking if parents are being state subsidized? Does that affect the application?
I'd have to go back to the original question of what you're looking at exactly, but you're not required to have children who are receiving subsidized care, but you have to, I think, attest to a willingness to serve that population. So the question is likely asking you about that willingness to serve, or if your program is currently serving. But it is not a dependency to apply for the grant, no. Only your willingness to do so.
And another application-based question. So if the center is open and operating, but we have a pending license revocation that we are sorting out, is the center still able to apply?
That's a good question. So the requirement is that you have to be open, operating, and providing service to at least one child in care. So there are certain enforcement statuses that prevent the operation of the program. Revocation is not one of them. So you are eligible to apply while currently in revoked status, yes. If the program moves forward with enforcement and actually does cease operations, though, you will not receive payments if the license closes, and you will also be required to attest that all funds that received from the grant were used prior to the closure date, and any unspent funds must be returned.
Okay, so we do have some more licensing questions. So the question is, I had to close my old license on August of this year in order to get my new license, which I got on August 17th, 2022. I'm trying to apply, but it's still telling me I'm not eligible. What can I do?
So that's the form that we were talking about earlier. So so you seem to be one of the programs that we're talking about has a successor program where, for whatever reason, you had to close your other operations and reopen at a new location, but you're functionally this is the same program. You would go online, find the solicitation of interest inside there. There's a link that you can click on and complete it. Give us necessary information like information about your old program, like the license number, the name of it, the name of the operator, et cetera. And then we will evaluate whether or not that program specifically meets the criteria to allow a transfer of the grant to the successor program.
Okay, so a couple questions again on use of funds. So is there a limit on how much we can ask for to support our programs?
I'm not sure if I understand the question because the limits are actually preset amounts. It's not a requested amount like you are requesting to receive the grant, but the dollar amount of what you received is dependent on the modality of the program and the amount of children that's served if it is a center-based operations. All of that information of how much the grant amount is for is posted in the solicitation of interest that's available on our website.
And can the funds be used to provide additional paid holidays or time off for staff, paying for a loss of funding if the center is closed?
That's one of those. It's a tough one to answer because with anything, if it's a perk of the position, the dollar amount and the tracking purposes that you would need to record in order to submit in the event of an audit is the question part of this, right? So I think that there are probably other avenues of spending the funds that would be easier for you to record, like again going back to the cost of the salary to your employees or the cost of any potential raises or bonuses or otherwise. Those are clearer and easier for tracking purposes. I'm not sure how you would be able to track the dollar amount of that paid leave. It may be more burdensome than it may be worth for you. So I would recommend trying to work with some of your local CCRNR who can help advise you on how to spend the funds that would be easier for tracking and accounting in the event that your program was selected for an audit.
John, while we're on the topic of how to use funds, there were a couple of questions that came in that I don't think we've addressed yet. We had at least two people, maybe more, ask about adding new staff. So not their current staff, but they want to recruit new staff, and they're wondering if they do that, does that fall under the 75% or the 25%?
Well, staff salary is part of the 75%. So it's if you're hiring new staff and paying them a salary to be in your program, and that money could be used under that 75%. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely.
This is Linda. Do we need to go back to that previous question too about paying for a loss of funding if the center is closed? Because I'm not sure I understand that question, but the program has to be open, operating, and caring for at least one child to be eligible for funding. So if the program was closed for a period of time, that may affect their eligibility for funding.
Great, thank you. And continuing with some of the similar types of questions. So if someone in their center applied a rate increase, when will it needed to have taken effect? If we're increasing this program this year, is that an applicable use of funds?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the question. What time stamp does that one have? I didn't understand
11:29
it.
from Kirsten. Right, so it sounds
11:21.
like if they increased their staff pay perhaps this year, would it still be an applicable use of funds?
Is the rate increase the pay that they're paying their staff? Is that what they mean by rate increase?
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm not really I'm not sure about the question.
Kirsten, if you wanted to follow up with that further, oh yes, she did. She says yes, rate increase for staff pay rate.
So that answer would be yes. If you're increasing their pay rate, that would be an appropriate use of the funds.
And another similar question, I guess, continue to further clarify on this. Beth asks, does this include all wages or only the increase in wages?
The wages itself are a eligible expense. So it's meant to support like additional the ability for programs to offer more support to their programs because we're trying to meet the need of the difficulties in hiring and maintaining a competitive salary. So we understood that there was an increased cost there, but like the salary of the programs themselves is what is an eligible expense. Yes.
Okay, and do we have examples that we can provide of mental health supports that are approved?
I don't have any on this call, but if you'd like, you should follow up with your local CCRNR who might be able to help point you in the direction of services that might be available to you or your program that you could refer your staff to, and the the contact information to be able to put people together if need be.
So switching gears a little bit, going back to the application submission itself, we have some providers that have problems with their TIN EIN number. And the question here in this particular example says when they go onto the application and their status, they see that their TIN EIN number does not match what the IRS has. What should they do to help troubleshoot issues with their TIN and EIN number?
That's a very good question. So we are aware that there's a small pocket of providers who received stabilization funds that the tax ID information that we have for that program, when we tried to match it against the IRS's database, there was a mismatch. Very often that mismatch is caused between if we tried to submit perhaps the program operator social security number attached to what may be their program name. For example, the name of the program is childcare, and they gave us a social security number. That number will not match childcare because that number matches the person who owns childcare, if that makes sense. So it may be just about making sure that the legal business name that is connected to your account, and you can contact your licensor, you can contact the CCRNR who can validate what your actual, what the actual legal business name is of your program. And then it would be, once you have that information, you could update your tax ID number in your Salesforce application to reflect the correct number for that. Because there's also an employer ID number Most of the times that those are associated, I mean, almost always with any center base, but very often an operator who's using their home also could be using an employer ID number. So it's just about making sure that those two match. Because what we do is we take the information that you gave us and we share it with the IRS. And if there's an accurate match, we are able to make a payment. But for Stabilization 2.0 workforce support expenses, any program that their tax ID number does not match their legal business name, we are unable to continue payments until that there is a confirmed match. If you have questions about that, the CCRNRs have been briefed with an understanding of the scenario. They also have a way to escalate the issues to OCFS, and we can try to work with your account to enable for you to make entries if you're not already able to. But we are also just diligently working with the providers to make sure that everything is as it should be.
All right, so Patricia is wondering, how are award amounts determined? So, for example, is there a minimum and a maximum for each daycare? How is it determined how much each facility might be awarded?
Sure. So it would be going back to the solicitation of interest that was available on posted on our website. There is a table inside of that has a breakdown of the different modalities, whether it be a daycare center, after-school childcare program, a group family daycare, or a family daycare program. And then if it's a center-based, it's based off of capacity. So programs that are serving 3 to 50 children have one payment amount, 51 to 100 have another payment amount, 101 to 150, and so on and so forth. The larger the program, the more money that the payments will be. There's also a breakdown between, there's a New York City rate, and then there's also a downstate rate, and then there's a rest of state. Downstate is considered Long Island and most of Westchester.
And John, this
the
is Linda.
counties that, yep.
Sorry, a follow-up question. And what date did we pull the information in regards to capacity to determine what they're eligible for? So if the capacity went up or down.
Yep. So for the people who are applying who already had an account, you might see, like you have Stabilization 1.0. When you apply for the application, you might see what the capacity was back over in the summer. We did an extract in June of what these programs, what all the programs in the state had for the current capacity. If that has changed since June, that will be recalculated before the first payment is made.
Thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
great.
That was good. Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to jump in, and I see a question here from the CCRNR saying that they have programs that cannot access the application due to and are getting an ineligibility status, and the statement that they cannot assist providers with troubleshooting. I'm not sure what the cannot is referring to, whether they don't have the information or they feel that it's not within their role. I want to reiterate that they should be forwarding any issues or concerns up to ECLC, which will then inform us if there's additional information that we need to provide, or ECLC isn't able to answer that. And you are able to assist providers. It's part of the technical assistance that we gave to you guys, and we have PowerPoints and resources for you. This is not a competitive grant. It's a first come, first serve. John, correct me if I'm misstating that. So there is no issue with you helping the providers navigate through the application portal.
No, you're 100% right, and it's not even first come, first serve. When we designed the grant, we created the dollar amount that would be able to give this set amount of dollars to every single program in the state. Like our assumption is that every single program in the state will be participating, and we have enough in the grant to cover all of them.
Great.
So
Thank you.
Our absolute hope and goal is that every single program in the state does participate who's eligible.
So Piper, I know we only have a few minutes left in our scheduled time for this webinar. How would you like to proceed with the Q&As? We do have a lot of questions still left.
We do. I think, Amanda, you read my mind. I think we have time for one more. So is there one topic we haven't covered yet? I'm sort of scanning through. Or Jessica, John, Linda, Chastity, feel free if there's a question here that you think might be a good one to end on.
Well, I guess I want to reaffirm. So there are multiple resources to be able to help get your questions answered to beyond this um, uh, um, talk through. We have the Human Services Call Center has established a phone line that's directly built for this. That phone number is available on our website. They can help answer many questions as well as provide some base level technical assistance. If they don't have the answer for you, they will help connect you with your local CCR&R who has more access and more understanding. There is a person in every single CCR&R across the state that has the ability to work with you, help you answer your questions, and then escalate the question if they aren't able to successfully help you. We partnered with the ECLC to be able to take more questions and offer technical support and assistance to our CCR community. And beyond that, they also OCFS will support all of these agencies in providing answers to the questions. So no matter the question, if you have it, you can always call the helpline. You can also contact your CCR&R, and we will endeavor to answer every single question. We will help everybody in need. It's just a matter of time and thinking problems through. Sometimes there are some very edge case scenarios, questions like we talked a little bit about today, as far as like how, can we cover expenses from giving everybody the day off or providing childcare in the program? Like, so these nuanced questions that are very specific, are not as easy to post to everybody because they are very one-off. But if you have these questions, go to your CCR&Rs and talk it through. I think they will probably offer the same advice that we did too, which is just to, there are other uses of the funds that are clearer to track and record and will be easier for you if you were, again, ever selected to be audited for use of funds.
And with
All
that,
right,
we
with that,
probably have well, we have no time to spare. My clock just turned to 12, so I wanted to thank everyone at OCFS. Thank you, Chastity, Jessica, John, and Linda for joining us today and answering so many of these fantastic questions. And thank you to all of you for your really wonderful questions today. As I mentioned, we did record today's session, so we will post this and the PowerPoint that was used to the website shortly. But thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day and a wonderful rest of your week, everyone.